Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sky Blue community, or what you call it in English, because this episode is going to be in English, and that's because we have you, Richard, with us today.
Hi, how are you?
And it's because you wrote to Morten if there was a pub in Copenhagen where you could watch the City game with other City supporters. And Morten wrote, come to Shamrock and maybe talk to Bjørn because I'm also there a lot. And then we talked a lot, and you had a lot of cool stories. So I was like, why not make an episode with you and Morten, because you two have a lot of cool Manchester City stories.
Absolutely, I'm happy to be here, and I'd like to say thank you to you for your excellent hospitality at the Shamrock. My wife and I had a couple of great afternoons in there. The Chelsea match with the little bit of a shaky start, shall we say, from Husanov, but and then the Arsenal match, which I don't want to talk about.
Yep, we don't need that one in our memory, but us two meetings should be there. That was the good experience from that match. Let's say it like that.
Yeah.
And so one part of this episode is gonna be like the Manchester City fan side of it, how Morten and Richard became City fans and so on. And the next part, because you're both doing volunteer work for some Manchester City supporters clubs, where you use some of your spare time to make it easier for us other fans to experience Manchester City in different ways. So let's also say hi to you, Morten. Hello. And we also talked about that this is also what the Manchester City supporters clubs can do, because a guy from Toronto writes to you, Morten, and then he watches Manchester City with some Danish fans. Like, I think that's a very cool story. That
and now we're sitting here.
Now we're sitting here.
It's funny what football can do.
It really is. But
blue family.
Yeah.
Blue family. But let's start with the Manchester City fan experience, because Richard, let's start with you. How did you fall in love with Manchester City?
Well, it's a good story, and like many of us, I think I didn't choose Manchester City. Manchester City chose me. Started a new school in the town of Southport, about an hour west of Manchester. 1972, 1973, something like that. We'd moved there from Wales, where my dad had been working, and he got a job in Liverpool, and we ended up living about 45 minutes north of Liverpool in Southport. And started primary school, walk in their first day, nervous like everybody is. And two lads come up to me and say, who do you support? And I didn't support anyone. I was 7. And so they said, well, if you decide to be a Manchester City supporter, you can hang out with us. And 2 lads called Michael and Peter, and I owe them a debt of gratitude to this day. For my sins, I became a City fan that day. Didn't take an active interest, maybe for a year or so. Went to a match. My dad took me to Main Road, and I just remember walking out, and it was that awkward piece of Main Road between the main stand and the North Stand, H Block it was called. And I remember walking out into that area and just this massive green pitch, and I was in love. That was it. City lost the game. It was the return of Malcolm Allison, who had left us earlier that year to go and manage Crystal Palace, and we were managed at the time by a gentleman called Johnny Hart, who had a lot of health problems, and certainly coaching City wasn't going to help that. We lost 3-2. I fell in love that day, and that was the beginning of a love story. That's continued to this day. I lived in England until the late 1980s, season ticket holder on the old Kipax for many years. I met a Canadian girl, moved over to Canada, and I thought that that was going to be the end of my ability to follow the Blues from afar, because back in those days we didn't have the television coverage and cable and streaming, obviously, that we do now. But found a group of like-minded Mancunians, and we developed an unofficial group of fans back in the mid-1990s. We'd get together to watch a videotape game from the week before that one of the lads' brothers who worked at Manchester Airport would put on the Toronto plane. Pete would pick it up. We'd go to a pub and we'd watch it a week old, knowing the results. I've now got a whole family of Blues, and my kids are Blues. They're in their 20s and absolutely rabid Blues. Never miss a game. It's. I'm sure it's the same with you lads, and pretty much every Blue that you meet. Like once City is in your bloodstream, that's it. There's no escape. For better or for worse, as they say, right?
True.
So that's my story. Like I said, City chose me. I could have been a Liverpool fan. Actually, 2 years after that, I decided that City weren't very good, and I became a Liverpool fan for a day. And my maths teacher, he said, "No, lad, you don't do that. You never change your team." And that was 1974. And if you remember the great Liverpool teams of the 70s and 80s, it's like I could have had all of that. But I'm glad I stuck with City. Wherever you go, and if you're lucky enough to be able to get together with fellow City fans for a match like I was in Copenhagen, they're always top people. I wouldn't change a thing.
Patience is key. You got your glory time just some years later, decades later.
We won't talk about the state I was in when we won the FA Cup in 2011.
We will not dive deep into that then.
No, not if it's a family show.
And Morten, how did you become a Manchester City supporter?
Well, actually, it's quite a long story, but I'll try to make it a bit shorter. Back in the day, there was Danish television broadcasters one game per week from the English Premier League, well, first division it was at that time, and they also broadcasted the FA Cup final. And I don't have any memories of that time. It was the FA Cup final of 1981. I can't remember. I was 8-9 years old back then, and I don't, as I said, I don't have much memories from that time in my life, but I remember that game. There's two games actually. So I remember watching the game, and I just was very fascinated by the light blue shirts of Manchester City, and I also liked the name Manchester City. I thought it sounded very cool, and that was just about it. And they were in my blood then. But in the 80s, there was no internet. There was really nothing. There was newspapers, and I just followed them for years in the newspapers. And when sometimes it was showed in Danish television. It was very rare actually, but sometimes they were there. So it was first in the 1990s again. I really began to follow them. I lived in England in Actually, I lived in London in 1996-97 season, where City were in shambles at that time. And I thought to myself, why don't I try to go to a game? Football hadn't, in that time of my life, I was very young, so I had many other interests, girls' parties and drinking and all that, but football was not a high priority. But now, living in England, I thought, why not take a couple of City games? I didn't have much money. I was a student, so it was also expensive at that time, and beginning to be expensive. So but I traveled up to Oxford, Manchester City, one February day in 1997. City were stuck not in the bottom, but almost the bottom of the first division then, the championship today. And I had no expectation. Oxford was a very good team at that time, and a very good first division team. And City were shambles. But I went up there, stood along, got my ticket in the way end, so it was great to see all the fans. I had never met City fans before, and suddenly there was 2,000-3,000, I think there were. So yeah, that was a very a very great moment to see all the blues that I hadn't seen one blue in my life, and now suddenly there were so many of them. Many of them look like Oasis, the Gallagher brothers, because they were they were so big at that time. So Oasis. So before the game, there was Oxford 8 years against City 8 years, and City won that game. I think it was on a very short pitch, 5 against 5, and City won, and the City fans went wild. I think, oh my God, what's going to happen if we win this game? This is when the game begins. And yeah, and then the game began, and City played really well, which was very rare that in that season. And they won the game 4-1. King Klatz and Uwe Rösler scored. It was a brilliant game. Alan Ball, he was in the stands at that game. And he had quit City earlier that season, saying it was a shit team. He didn't use that word, but and they were going nowhere. And Alan Ball, he was at Sky as he commentating the game. And the City fans sang, "Are you watching Alan Ball? Are you watching Alan Ball?" I'll never forget that. And when the game ended, I went to the McDonald's. I don't know why, but I met some City fans there, and they were so thrilled about the win, and they talked about we're going to win the FA Cup, and all. I think we had Brentford away in the fourth round or something like that. We didn't win the FA Cup. That's another story. But I went home to London by train. My girlfriend was with me. She now my wife, and she didn't. She liked football but had no team. But she also fell in love with Manchester City that day, and when that was just one of the greatest days of my life. It was such a great experience, and then I was just blue from that day. It was a great day. So I returned home to Denmark that summer, just alone, sort of. I thought I was the only one watching City in Denmark, following City, supporting City. So one Friday, I went down. That was a year later, and City were still they were even worse in that season. So I went downtown with my girlfriend. I think we went out to dinner, and then we just could see Middlesbrough, Manchester City, and I think it was a penultimate game of the season or something like that. We had to win it to avoid relegation, and we didn't. But that's another story. I went to the pub, and sitting there, there was almost nobody in the pub. There was Middlesbrough, Manchester City. Nobody wanted to see that. But there was another guy, and he was just looking at me. You didn't go to pub in football shirts at that time, or at least I didn't. So, but he was watching me, and I was watching him, and we suddenly, yeah, I think he's a City fan. My girlfriend said, yeah, and he also was really looking at me, and yeah, and he came over to me after the game, and he told me he was City fan too, and suddenly there was a Danish City fan. And luckily, he was actually the chairman of the Danish supporter club. So he got me in that day, but we were only 20 members, I think, at that time. So, but after that day, I met a few others, and we have built a community, starting building a community here. And since that, it's been a great part of my life. Brian, that's the guy, the first Manchester City fan I met. His name was Brian. He said he stopped as a chairman in 2000, and he asked me if I wanted to take his role up. And of course, I said yes to that, and I have been that ever since. So that's 25 years to this summer.
That's a great story.
Yeah, and if I should tell mine shortly, it's because I took an education that was only 1 year long, where I met my now He's one of my best friends, Nikolaj Vinding, which is also a big part of this podcast. And I was only a Brøndby supporter in Denmark. I didn't care about any teams in outside of Denmark because I had to get the fan experience. I love to going to Brøndby Stadium and get that feeling, but sitting down in my couch and watch a game, I couldn't really get any emotions out of it. But when I met him, he said, I'm a Manchester City supporter, and I've heard that they watch the games together in Copenhagen. So why don't we go in and see some matches together? And that was at Shamrock and some other places we moved around. And in the start, I only came to drink beer and talk with my friend and everything. But then one beer took the other, and one game took the other. And then suddenly the feeling was there. Now I felt like there is something more than just sit in a couch and watch the game. So that's also how I got into becoming a Manchester City fan, through like the thing that the supporters club do, like make these what do you call it, pubs, main pubs for fans. Yeah, so that was my way in. And then I wanted to ask you, because you both went into like your first memories with the club, but this is not your favorite player we are talking about. It's more your favorite player from the start when you became a fan. Like, which player were like the player that where you said, wow, and maybe made you a bit more of a Manchester City fan, if you could say that. I don't know who wants to start.
I think just Richard should go.
I think the first team that I really fell in love with at City was the Tony Book team of 1976. I was lucky enough to go with my dad to the League Cup final against Newcastle at Wembley. It's a long trek down there from Southport, and City won the game 2-1, and Dennis Chewett scored that amazing overhead kick just after half time. And there was Peter Barnes and Dennis Chewett who just flew down the wings, and I absolutely adored them. I got to mention Colin Bell, because although back then you rarely saw, you didn't get any live games. The only live game every year you'd get was the FA Cup final, and God knows we were never in that until 1981, and then for a long time after. But Colin Bell was just a different class when you got to see him on Match of the Day, and he was cut down in his prime by Martin Buchan of the Rags. But that Tony Book team of 76, and then we came within a point of beating Liverpool to the title the following year. If Dave Watson hadn't scored an own goal against Liverpool that season, we'd have probably won the league. I loved Mike Doyle as well. He was such a battler. He hated United. He had to have police outside his house the night before a derby. Absolutely detested them with a passion. That whole team, like, that was me growing up. If I had to pick one player from that era, though, it has to be Colin. I mean, he was just, until Pep's team, or maybe a little bit before, came along, there was just nobody to compare. He was just different class.
Morten, what player was exceptional for you when you started supporting City?
When I started supporting City, it was the 80s, and we had no, as I said, there's no internet, and I could follow them through the newspaper, and there were never anything other than a result of perhaps a goal scores from the game. So I can't really say. But if I have to say something from things I've read and things I have seen today, I was very thrilled with Jerry Gow. I think he had a great attitude, and he he looked like he was 50 years old, but still he had a great attitude. I really liked him. But what we have to go into the 90s, I think, to really, before I start knowing the players, and you saw a little bit more from you could follow them better in television, and it broadcasted more games. I think the first players I really liked was Niall Quinn, Paul Walsh, Then we, of course, had King Classy. He was a great entertainer, not a very good team player, I think, but he was a great entertainer, and he was something we could hold on to in bad times, because he was really, really a good player in the worst, probably one of the best players we've had in the worst team we have ever had. So, but my first really favorite player, I must say, was Kevin Horlock, because when I debuted as a Manchester City fan on the stands, it was also his debut. So I think that's why I really liked him, and he also had a good game at Oxford, the game I talked about before. So that was probably my first favorite player. After that, we had Sean Gota. Really liked him. So great, a great man, a really likable player. Who else? Jared Weekens. I think he's one of the most unsung heroes of our history. The Dutch defender, player of the year in player of the season in the season in the third tier. Great player, and a really, really nice man. I've met him a couple of times. So today's I don't know. Today I don't have any favorite players from. Really, I like the most of them.
So you don't have a currently favorite player?
No, it depends on the day. You ask me about.
Fair. Yeah, but we can ask you, Richard, because now you answered the first player or who got you excited by being a City fan. But what about your favorite all-time player and currently favorite player? Can you name those two?
God, it's so hard. We've become so spoiled, haven't we?
True.
I think my favorite player of the modern era has to be Spanish Dave. David Silva. There's just, I mean, he's one of those players that you'd get commentators. If David Silva made a foul, they'd say, "Oh, that's not like Silva." It's like, well, you don't watch him every week. He was a vicious little bastard when he wanted to be, and he played in those little pockets. And he's one of those players that, if you just look at him based on statistics, like some people do in the modern era, his statistics were nothing special. But you look and see how many pre-assists that he had, how the link-up play would be. I mean, the partnership that he had with Sergio, and he was just poetry to watch. Like, he played football on a different level. I love players like Kevin. I love Phil. I love Bernardo. I love his effort. I love how he hates the Scousers and United. But when it comes to appreciating the beauty of the game, I think David Silva is just a class above for me.
So you don't have currently a player that you
in the current team?
Yeah, in the current team, yeah.
I'd probably say Bernardo, just because of his work rate.
Bernardo.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I get really annoyed with the amount of new fans that we have that are just showing up in Haaland shirts. It strikes me that those are the same kind of fans that might have had a Messi Barcelona shirt or a Ronaldo Man United shirt a few years ago. It's very easy to say Haaland's your favourite player. And for kids, I get it, because it's about the glory and the goals and that. But I like the guy. He's great, don't get me wrong. But when it comes to the current team, I think Bernie. And I think Husanov has the opportunity to become a bit of a cult hero at City. The fact that he took the number 45 shirt, and we all know what madman had that shirt before. And he seems like a real character. I think once he learns to speak English, I think we're going to have some fun with him. And I'll always remember where I was to see his debut. The Shamrock.
Yeah. Luckily, he played better afterwards, and right now he really seems like a player that can go all the way. Oh my God, he's so good, and no nonsense player. And Pep Guardiola also said he came with no washback or nothing. He came to play football.
He just seems like he's a character. I like characters in football. It's such a bland sport these days with the people. So I think we're going to have some fun with him. And also, do you recall when Laquan Mangala made his debut for City and he played Chelsea, and he looked like He looked like the best centre-back on the planet. He was absolutely unbeatable. I think he went up against Drogba that day, and Drogba didn't get a kick. And then he never had a good game for City again after that. I think he's the anti-Mangala. He had a terrible start. Poor kid. I mean, imagine being 20 years old, moving to a country where you don't speak the language. You're thrown into the first team that week because of an injury crisis. And you do that in the first 2 minutes and then get a yellow card. I mean, and the commentators seem to be trying to dig him out and say he's having a poor game when he isn't. They said he was having a poor game against Liverpool and against Madrid. I didn't see him as the problem in either of those two games. I think the kid has an awful lot of character. I think we're going to have some fun with him too.
It's also he played, I don't know the country before French football, but it's also like a very fast career. Like then you have some years in French football, and then you are at the Etihad playing against Chelsea. You know, it's just like boom. So I can also understand if he has been very nervous.
Yeah, exactly.
Also going from that and then standing at the Bernabeu and be like, holy shit, what is happening? So the next question, and that is, what is, because you have been fans in a long time, have seen the ups and downs, what moment means the most to you? Because is it a trophy win, or is it a promotion, or what is it? I don't know who want to start, but you can think about it.
Go ahead.
I think my favorite moment was Wembley in '99, the Paul Dickov moment when he equalized, because I was there. I was at Wembley that day. I'll never forget it. And it was so important. And if without that moment we wouldn't have experienced all this we have today. So for me, that was the moment. But of course, the Sergio Aguero moment in 12 is also up there, of course. But it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Paul Dickov, the equalizer that day at Wembley. So I would definitely say Wembley '99.
100%. I was there as well. I flew over. Didn't have a match ticket. Didn't even have an airline ticket. I flew standby in those days, and managed to get on the plane to London. Stayed with a mate's house in North London. Had too much to drink the night before. Managed to get a ticket I stood outside Euston Station and just kept on shouting, anyone got any spares? Anyone got any spares? Managed to get a spare. Got into the ground next day. And I was staying with a friend down in Kent on the other side of London that night. And it was going to take me 2 hours plus to get down there. And I picked up my little backpack, because you could take a little backpack into a stadium back then. Picked it up on 89 minutes when Gillingham were 2-0 up. And I thought, I've come all this way. I'll stay and boo them off at least. And so obviously stayed, and I had bruises on the back of my legs for 3 weeks. Got down to my friend's house in Kent that night, and he's a United fan, and allegedly they'd won the triple that week. So he'd only bought Belgian triple beers in for us to drink. And it was a lovely night, and we were sitting in his back garden until about 5 a.m. And then another friend drove me to Heathrow. I was still hammered when I was on the plane. Had the spinning plane all the way back to Toronto. No voice, legs were killing me. Best weekend of my life. It was just ridiculous. There's been so many times, good and bad, but that I think, Mark Morton, you're probably, having gone through the late 80s and the 90s as you did, with no upside whatsoever. I think in that moment, all of us that stayed just forgave everything. Like it was a moment of pure bliss. And without that, the Aguero moment and everything since doesn't happen. It's as simple as that. That club was in major financial trouble back then. Unforgettable. I'm glad you were there. It was such a special day.
Really a special day, and I'll never forget it.
No, there's bits I can't remember, but I won't forget it.
Fair enough. And now To make a bridge over to the volunteer work, then I wanted to ask Richard, how is it to be a fan of Manchester City in Canada?
Well, it used to be very lonely, I'll be honest with you. But as I mentioned earlier, purely by chance, I used to work in the travel industry, and one of my customers that I had one day, a lovely lady called Jean, she was obviously from Manchester. We got chatting, and long story short, through her and through another friend, we discovered that there were fellow masochists in the Toronto area. And we get together and we'd watch these matches a week late. And then in 2013, I got a phone call out of the blue from a guy in Toronto, and I had no idea that there was a supporters group in Toronto at that point in time. And he phoned me up and he said that Paul Lake was going to be coming over to Toronto with the trophy from 2012, and he'd heard that we had a supporters branch out in the west end of Toronto, and would we be interested in having an event and working with the Toronto guys? So obviously, yes. But so anyway, we set the club up officially from that year onwards, which felt a bit of a glory hunter thing to do, to be honest with you. But most of us had been around watching City together since the mid-90s. So we set it up as an official branch in 2013. It was the Mississauga branch. Mississauga is like a sort of, it's like Manchester and Salford. You know, Mississauga is the Salford, if you like, to Manchester. It's a bit nicer, but not much. So we set up that branch and we worked together with the Toronto guys, have done ever since. They're a great bunch of people and they allow us access to their events, and we would likewise do the same. It's all reciprocal. And then we were discovering that we were getting fans from further afield. So we've spread it now around what is called the Golden Horseshoe, which runs from Toronto around to Niagara Falls. And we actually live out near Niagara Falls, about 20 minutes away. So there's quite a few of us out here. We just get together locally because it's an hour and a half to go into Mississauga in traffic. But yeah, it's a smallish branch. We have about 40 members. I've been the general secretary since we set it up. Every year, as I'm sure Morton does, you sort of think, oh God, this is a pain in the ass. I might give this up this year. But it's there basically. I mean, apart from collecting the membership dues at the beginning of the season, and through the season answering membership inquiries, the main focus of it is to get fans over to the UK to actually experience a match. Ideally, and I love the fact, Morton, that your first game was an away game, because there's nothing like an away game. And I've been lucky enough to take my lads to defeats at Wolverhampton and Aston Villa over the last few years, which is very character building. But there's nothing like an away game, and the point of the supporters club is really to foster a sense of community. Like, we'll get together for summer barbecue. We haven't had too many pub meets since COVID, to be honest with you, because the demand hasn't been there, and a lot of our members were a smaller branch, and a lot of our members are now in their 60s and 70s and less inclined to come out to a pub to watch it, and because the Toronto region is so vast, it does take a long time to get somewhere. We're not blessed with the same excellent public transportation that you have in Copenhagen, certainly. So yeah, I mean, the main thing really is to encourage people to go over there. I had a new member a couple of weeks ago, went over to watch the Arsenal game. Not quite sure how that worked out for him. But we had one of our members at Tottenham this week. One of the guys who's I think he's in his early 80s now. He was over in the UK for family, and he was at Tottenham this week. So it's great when they go over, and it's all about spreading the word, meeting like-minded people, and getting over. I'm lucky that I've been over many times over the years. But for some people, it's a once-in-a-lifetime deal. So, got to remember that.
True. And Morten, how is it to be a Manchester City fan in Denmark compared?
Well, it's not that lonely anymore. As I said, when at first I thought back in the day, I thought I was the only one in Denmark, and actually the first guys, other City fans I met in Denmark, they also have thought the same. They also thought I'm the only one in Denmark. So luckily they weren't. So now you ask about what we do today and what our work is. So we work a lot. We work a lot with the Norwegians. We used to be Scandinavian Supporters Club. No, now we're called Norway Denmark. Don't know why. It's just technicality. Like you said, Richard, our job is to get people over, to get them tickets. But we are not a traveling agency. We also say we're also trying to make a community where we try to support the city and the community for the less fortunate in Manchester, trying to give something back to the city, because we will not be tourist fans. We are actually football fans, and we will also care about the city and the citizens in Manchester. We will try to give something back, not just taking their football team to us. We'll show our respect and give something back to the community. So that's also something we're trying to do, and like you also do, Bjorn, with your podcast and the light blue community, you can call it in English. Trying to gather Danish fans to have a platform where we can meet and get new friends and share memories and planning things and journeys together and making new friends, actually. And most of my friends are actually City fans. Apart from my family, some of them are United fans, but not that dedicated. Most of my private friends, are actually connected to Manchester City. So
let me ask you a question, because the strategy that when the emails come from Kevin Parker at City these days, the window to apply for tickets is typically so short now, like 48 hours.
Yeah.
Are you finding that to be a problem? I mean, it's a huge problem for people over here, because as soon as the Sky and the TNT fixtures come out with the amended times, and it's at that point that they have the confirmed kickoffs, we have 48 hours to apply for a ticket. And then God forbid if you apply for one and then the person can't find a cheap flight, you get all kinds of trouble from the OSC in Manchester if you ask for one and then back out.
Well, actually, I don't deal a lot with that. We have Tor in Norway who organizes that. So luckily, but I've heard of it, and it's a very big problem.
Yeah, it's not great.
Tor, he's very, very stressed sometimes about it, I know, and he is also can become very angry sometimes if one can't travel because of something coming up, so he must give up his ticket. It can be very difficult, but yeah, I have heard about the things you described about the very, very short time.
And it's a recent thing. It's got worse over the last.
Yeah.
I want to say from the beginning of last season, because back in the day we would have Kevin at City would send out the email and it would be for maybe one match or two matches, but now it's that entire 4 to 6 week block of match tickets, and you have 48 hours. It's like if you have the match day membership and you want to buy tickets on the club site at the beginning of the season, they release everything now in June or July for the whole season. So you've basically got to plan your whole season so far ahead now, or face waiting until fairly last minute to get it all sorted out. It's not easy. Interesting to see if that changes over time.
Well, but it is also a bigger problem for you because you have to travel so far. It's not such a big problem here in Denmark. We have a 1 hour and a half flight to Manchester. So and sometimes very, very cheap. I think sometimes you could get a ticket for £10.
Yeah.
£50 maybe, but so it's not that very difficult for us to organize a trip. I think it's for some of you guys, it's a lifetime experiences, I should say.
Yeah, for some
Once
of
in
them
a
it is.
lifetime.
Yeah.
But it's also, if we can take it back, then the Norwegian and Danish Manchester City branch is also the oldest branch outside of the UK. Started as a only Norwegian branch, and last year it was their 50-year birthday. So that's also a bit fun to be part of that, Morten. Or do you think we are like the outsiders, the Danish people who came into the branch, or how do you feel it?
I think it's very kind and great that the Norwegians has invited us in, and even more great of them to actually add our name to the branch. So now in Norway, Denmark. Actually, we used to be Scandinavia because Sweden was also here, but they have created their own branch. So we only have about 10 or 15 Swedish members left. I don't know why they still want to be a member of a branch called Norway, Denmark, but it can be something about they have friends there. They have met on travel, so I can understand that. There's Andreas in Malmö. He's still a member, and he knows he knows me, and he knows some of the Norwegians. So why should he join Sweden branch, which most of their activities is in Stockholm, I think. So yeah.
Well, from our experience traveling in Denmark and Sweden a few weeks ago, the Danes are the friendlier people.
Okay, yeah, they have a bit more reserved in Sweden. They are.
Yeah, they're nice people in Sweden. Don't get me wrong. We had a lovely time.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. But yeah.
But what was your question, Bjorn? I actually lost the...
Yeah, but maybe I also lost it a bit. But it's also about this, you said before, about you are not a travel agency. And I also think in Denmark, you're doing a good job with the Fan Cup, where all fans of different teams meet up and play 7 against 7 football, and it's all the other things that also connects us fans. I think is important in a supporters club, because of course you can just buy a expensive ticket if you want to go and see Manchester City at a bureau, but the supporters club, it should be feel like more, if you understand what I mean. Yeah. So that's also what like all the volunteering and I said praised you a lot last time because you live in the other side of Denmark, and then you come to Copenhagen as a trainer for this amateur match. I was like, wow, that's dedication.
Well, I don't think it's that much, but I just like the day. Maybe it's a bit mad, I don't know, but I like the day. So it's a football tournament when we play other supporter clubs, Liverpool, Manchester United, or it can also be other foreign clubs. It's only foreign clubs, not Danish clubs, fan clubs. So it's a very good day. We still haven't won it. We have been to the final once, but never won it. So it doesn't matter. It's just about having a great day. It's not about winning.
So the last question I have on my sheet here is, what is the plan for the future of like volunteer work? Because Morten, you have done this a lot, and everybody sees you as a foreman. Nobody wants to call you a talperson, but what is your future plans with the support club? I know it's a big question.
So, as I said, I just hope that people will turn to us for the main source when it comes to Manchester City support. And I hope that maybe more like you and me will do some volunteer work to try to make us more visible in the community, and people that many fans, other clubs fans, says that Manchester City fans, we are plastic and we are only here for the trophies, and I hope we can show them we're actually just as genuine as they are fans, their club. So that's but that needs more volunteers who wants to try, who wants to work and wants to share our community and show it.
True. And Richard, what is the future of the Toronto Supporters Club? Because right now, I feel like football has gotten like on a positive side over in the America. I don't know if it hits Canada, but I know there's a lot of fans becoming Manchester City fans in the US. So
Yeah, similar here, to be honest with you. The game has undergone huge growth, and having a World Cup partly in Canada next year is going to be immense. There should be 3 matches in Toronto. I'll be very lucky if I can get a ticket. I very much doubt it. Although I am a member of the Voyageurs, which is the Canadian national supporters organisation, and I've been to many, many, many Canadian World Cup qualifiers and Nations League games over the last several years, and in fact followed the national team back into the late 80s, early 90s, when you'd look at a team of 11 Canadian players that were out there in a stadium of 8,000, 6,000 of whom were the away fans, be it Mexico or the US or Jamaica or whatever, because it's such a multicultural area. And you'd have 6 or 7 of the Canadian players didn't even have teams at the time. They were unattached players, and they were terrible. It's got to be said. The Canadian team is really worth watching now under the leadership of Jesse Marsh. He's doing a fantastic job. We're optimistic that we've got a good chance of winning the Nations League in the States next month. I won't be going because I'm not going to the States for the next 4 years, but that's a whole other podcast. So the game has grown an awful lot, and City has big exposure because of the success over the last few years, and also having the likes of Erling Haaland in the team. So we field a lot of requests. We get a lot of emails come in through the City portal, but very few of them actually drop the membership fee and join, which I find odd, because it's not. We charge $20, which is about €13 or something like that. $20 would be, I think, about 100 krona, something like that. So it's only a small amount of money, and all the money does get used for community events, and we might be making a donation to City in the community because we've got a bit of a balance at the moment. So we'll see if we do that. But yeah, to basically just try and grow the community, try and encourage people to join, work together with the guys in Toronto, because our branch is west of Toronto and round towards Niagara, and just continuing to try and foster the community. Be nice to get more people to step up and volunteer. I don't know if you have the same challenges in your branches there. It sort of seems here like whoever's on the exec, kind of is on the line for everything. It's hard to get people to volunteer. But same, more of the same, I guess, over the next few years, and we'll see where the football takes us. But whether we're top of the Premier League or relegated on the 115 charges and down in League Two, we'll still be there. We'll still be there, loving the Blues. Yeah.
Yes. Now you said this about the new fans with Haaland shirts and so on. I've also thought, how can we connect like the older squad who has experienced, you can say, the downfalls and everything, and the new ones coming in. I'm also one of the new ones becoming a fan in really this glory era. Have you ever thought about like how can we connect them, or do you like feel, hey, I was fan when we were shit, or how is the feeling? If you know what I mean.
Is that for Morten or for me? Go ahead, Morten. What do you think?
Actually, I think it's a bit difficult, because many of the young people they think that us older fans who have experienced the harder times, that we look down at them. I can't say for my fellow older fantasy fans, but I don't. I think it's natural they're coming in and they're watching some of the greatest football ever seen, great players and also very likable players, I think. So I can definitely understand them. Why not? And why should they be any worse than us because we have seen harder times? If they're really fans, they will also stay for the harder times, which will definitely come, because football is like the life; it's up and down. So, because I think it shouldn't. They shouldn't think that about us. I really think most of us older fans, we love to see the young people coming in. Of course we do, but of course we can sometimes be thinking, oh my God, when they're complaining about a defeat or something.
When I name an episode that Manchester City is in a crisis, and you go like, you don't know what a crisis is.
Because we've lost 5 in a row. That's the worst crisis ever. I don't think that. But
I'll be honest with you. I kind of enjoyed that period back in the end of last year. It was like the return of an old friend.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. Like, everybody starts their football journey at some point, and I am always interested to find out because everybody has a story about how they became a City fan, right? And they're always good. A lot. I find a lot of people in their 20s and 30s came to us through the Manchester music scene. Some came to us through FIFA, playing on FIFA, and put together career mode or whatever on FIFA and did it as City. I mean, the alternative is that you've got millions more Man United, Liverpool, and Arsenal fans roaming around the planet. We don't want that. So no, I think, and I listen to all this. I listen to all the podcasts, the City podcasts. I spend a lot of time listening to the 9320 lads and the City Ramble and Noisy Pod and those guys. And it's everyone says the same. It's like we're a big City family, and everybody's welcome under the big tent. But do your bit, cheer the boys on, get involved, and it's a journey for life, because we've been so privileged this last 10, 12 years. And football does go in cycles. I mean, we're old enough to know, Morten, the great Liverpool teams, the great United teams, the great Arsenal teams. And the Schadenfreude over the last few years has been fantastic, with United especially. But we know that the day will come when post Guardiola, post whenever, that we're not winning titles year after year after year, and we'll see at that point how the support holds up, how the ability for City to fill that new stand works out. Right? Yeah, we'll still be there because we're too deep in at this point. But whether some of the newer ones will be,
there's no escape. You can't get out. So
no.
People
say to me, have you supported City all your life? And I just say, not yet.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's actually a very good one.
You can have that one, lads. Yeah.
Perfect. But then I just want to say thank you for you coming on, Richard, all the way from Canada. Of course, it's online, so not the biggest effort in that sense. But
you want to fly me into Copenhagen? I'll do this live, my friend, anytime.
Yes, then I think we have to take some more money for this. If we have to pay tickets from Canada.
But I'd love to say thank you for making my wife and I feel so welcome at the Shamrock, and big shout out to all the guys that were in there. Great bunch of people. I love the setup you've got there. It's just like somebody's basement. And the guy working behind the bar, super nice fella. Just a really, really nice atmosphere, nice vibe. And just thank you to everybody involved, and especially to you guys for making it happen. Appreciate it.
Glad to help.
If you ever come over here, let me know.
Yeah. Actually, I'm planning a trip over there. But
get in touch.
I won't be going to USA for the next 4 years, I think.
The Niagara Falls is better from this side anyway. So get in touch. We'll put you up.
Actually, I'm going to Southport. So next month in the Easter, where you said you came from. Yeah, because I'm going over for the Everton Man City game. Hopefully,
excellent.
I haven't my ticket yet, but I think I'll get it.
Yeah.
And then I know a guy in Southport, and he has invited me over to stay over there. So he is also a City supporter, of course. I met him when City visited Aarhus in the beginning of the century. He came over and I showed him the town. So now he's going to show me Southport 20 years later.
That won't take long.
I don't think so.
We'll have fun.
Yeah. Perfect. And also, thank you to you, Morten, for coming on.
It was great. A pleasure.